Well, I'm standing here with a man who needs no introduction whatsoever. Jerry Tracy, it's good to have you back in the building.
Jason, great to see you.
Man, you know, the experience that you had here working at WVTM 13, you did a lot of big weather events over the years. And with winter weather happening nearby, we wanted to bring you back and talk about the last big ice storm that we had in Birmingham, which was back in '96, 30 years ago.
30 years ago, and we talked about this over the last 24 hours, and at first I had a hard time remembering it because there were so many big events back then. Start off with the storm of the century, 93. 94, we had the Goshen tornado, terrible storm. In 95, Hurricane Ilpo barreled into the Gulf Coast, 125-mile-per-hour winds. It had been 150. And then, of course, the terrible West Jefferson tornado in 98. And before them was this storm in 96. So it kind of got lost in the shuffle of all those big events. But for about 24 to 48 hours, it made a big difference.
It was terrible. You know, I grew up in Cullman County, and we got it a lot worse than Birmingham did. We were out of school for 6 days.
Wow.
So it was an incredible, memorable storm for me. But from your perspective, it being 30 years since we've had something that impactful from an ice storm perspective. Now, remember, 2014 was not an ice storm. That was snow that fell on very cold ground.
Yes.
This is freezing rain. Now, tell me what you remember about the freezing rain and the sleet from 96.
I have several images. One, the first part of the storm was mostly freezing rain. And here, the temperatures were marginal, so the surface roads weren't that bad, but all the icicles formed in the trees and power lines and that kind of thing. But then the storm changed. About midday on Friday, I think it was, it changed to mostly sleet. And we don't get a whole lot of sleet here, but it sleeted for several hours. I still remember our chief engineer at the time, Ed Mathis. He went around the parking lot spreading rock salt by hand, which is not the efficient way to do it, but he was going above and beyond, obviously, for all of us, and that kept the parking lot in pretty good shape. But the problem was this. It was cold to begin with, but it got colder overnight. So Friday night, I get home okay. We did the 10 o'clock newscast. I got home okay. The next morning, I tried to drive, and I couldn't get the car to move anywhere. It was sliding toward the curb no matter what I did. Had to call the station, say, you got to rescue me, and I'll come in. But it really changed. It went from being a nuisance to being a very serious situation. People didn't move on Saturday.
So that's a good point. Nuisance to a serious situation. How easy was it for you to forecast that storm? And it sounds like maybe it wasn't all that easy because of some of the dynamics involved.
It was a challenge. All these storms, as you know, are, especially wintertime storms. I remember the day before, we were very concerned about it, and that idea worked out pretty well. I don't think we were ready for the really major change to heavy sleet. And again, we don't get sleet a whole lot here, and it sleeted very hard for several hours and actually accumulated quite a bit on the ground. And that changed the whole tone of the thing. It changed it from a kind of a nuisance to a very serious situation. We also thought, given the fact the cold air was getting deeper, that there might be some snowflakes. I know you experienced some, but we didn't hear. It was all sleet.
Yeah, the funny thing is the snow actually helped with traction a little bit. It made a little bit of a difference being able to walk outside. Okay, so last question for you on this. Forecasting today. You've only been retired a couple of years. You've had all these models that give us this incredibly granular data that just looks so real. Compare forecasting today to what it was like back in 96 and 93 when you didn't have all that.
You know, it should be easier. More tools, more models, sophisticated models. But here's the thing, Jason. I almost think back then it was a little simpler because we didn't have as much variety. It's like information overload now. We have so much stuff, and you have to compare one model to another. I think it becomes more brain-numbing at this point, looking at all this different information. And you're right, it comes in now with all these pretty colors, where it's blue is snowing, where it's red it's ice. We didn't have that back then, so we had to get more into the basic data, I think. And I think in some ways, look, all the measurements are, the forecasts are better now, and they are. But I think sometimes on the individual meteorologist, it's actually a bit harder.
Yeah, I think in our world today, just looking at the storm that's potentially happening in North Alabama and up into Tennessee, the trick of this forecast has been the consistency of these big global models that we always use. And now they have made a change on us because of really one or two very large scale factors, and they're making huge impacts on the forecast here locally. Jerry, thank you for coming by.
No, Jason, thank you. Always a pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Let's do this again sometime.
We will.